or not. You negotiating as Europe with America, Korea, Japan, you have clout. You've got the world's largest market. They want access to that market. We say, okay, as long as you give us X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
That's why we get good deals, by negotiating jointly with Europe. Negotiating separately, we're never going to get those deals.
And what are we going to get from it? Because here's one thing that I've noticed, right? When they're talking about this trade deal with Donald Trump, we're talking about what he wants from us. Privatizing our NHS and forcing the big American healthcare companies, lowering food standards. Yes, exactly. It's all about US access to us as a beachhead into Europe, and none of them have talked about what the hell we're meant to get from it.
What can we sell to Americans over the rest of the world? What privileged access?
And if you know how America
steel?
works
I don't think so. It's not going to be steel.
Well, we sell some of that.
Or...
We sell some high-grade steel to the US, and we've seen how the US president has behaved about that. Just puts up tariff barriers as and when he feels like it. And in fact, with steel, when the US president has done that to us before, both with Donald Trump and with George W. Bush, we pleaded for that to be reversed, got nowhere, and then it was the EU that rode into the rescue and said, if you do that, then we will put up prices on Florida oranges, on your bourbon whiskies in politically sensitive states, and then they both rolled back on that basis because the clout
we'd lose our leverage. We'd lose our leverage outside the EU.
We'd steal ourselves for a bad deal.
Yeah, well, totally. Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest.
We said we'd do some jokes, but
I mean, where is our leverage over the US? We've got a case now where a wife, a US diplomat, we can't even extradite here to face trial.
Whereas in Europe, the European arrest warrant would have sorted that out straight away.
Absolutely. So we have no leverage. We have no leverage over them. We're in such a weak position. I feel that in some ways, this last 3 years we've become far weaker just through this process.
Totally. Well, go to any international conferences, whether it be on data or artificial intelligence or on science, or I keep hearing it from different angles, but for the moment, the UK is in quarantine. They don't know where we're going. They don't know what structures we're going to be based on. We're a bit of a rogue state, really, actually. It's weird to say, because we were so esteemed before, and so we're just dropping out of all of these different layers and layers of different frameworks that are going on in the world. And so if like the Brexiteers like to think, all these countries around the world are in a race, and we just need to drop the shackles so we can go fast in the race. We're actually putting so many shackles on, and the others are so far ahead that even if it were advantageous in any way, we've got a lot of catching up to do. That's the damage of Brexit, before you consider that we haven't completed phase one.
And that's just the economic damage. Since we mentioned the European arrest warrant, in Europe, our police forces, our law enforcement authorities cooperate. So criminals that run from one country to another to escape prosecution, transnational gangs, all that sort of stuff, terrorists, we cooperate, we share databases, our police exchange information, we have the European arrest warrant to get something. We're dropping out of that voluntarily. We have no right of access as soon as we drop out of that. That means every criminal in Europe who wants to avoid prosecution somewhere else will come to Britain.
And remind me, who says they're part of Law and Order? Which one are they? Is that the Conservatives? And actually they're failing on a core issue.
In Lord Ashcroft polling, I remember the two axes that he put out recently, and it was kind of like Conservatives and Nigel Farage and Brexit Party, security and defence. It's kind of like, oh really? Oh, really? When we've given up Galileo, when we've given up, access to some of these critical databases as well in terms of law enforcement, and this was warned about, it's going to cost us a ton more, and it's just going to make us less safe.
I mean, one of my passions is the environment. So, again, that's another area where we had, when he was the Secretary of State Environment, Michael Gove, and Teresa Coffey when she was there, now she's at DWP, and we said, well, if we leave, we're going to have this new Environment Protection Agency. And I said, well, when's it going to start? And they said, oh, it'll be at the earliest, the beginning of 2021. And I said, well, what happens in between? They said, we can retrospectively, take legislation. So that means if you decide to dump, a load of diesel into the local river in 2020, what happens? Nothing. You've got to wait until 2021. It's ridiculous, you know. And at the moment we have environment protections from Europe, so we've got this whole issue.
So let me get that right. So climate change is a problem that can wait for a few years.
Yeah, it can wait. It can wait. I mean, if they're going to say they can conclude by the end of 2020, we're going to have this period where, you know, this no man's land, where anybody, Wild West of environmental protection is what I called it, where anybody can do anything they want.
And that, I mean, for me, that's one of the things that really hurts. As a Brit, as a proud Brit, I want my country to be responsible. I want it to do its part. And so that means be a team player and pull your weight. And what we've been doing is we've been dragging everyone else down, effing around with our own little, you know, idea of grandeur and greatness, but it's been slowing everyone else down, and it means that it drags down the entire effort of our continent, which in fact has been leading the charge on this.
Yes.
And that hurts because, you know, if we are Great Britain, if we are a great country, then we should be big enough and responsible enough to be helping out other countries, to be leading the way, to be a team player and also a team leader. And that's everything that we're pulling out of.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been to a number of UN climate change conferences, and the EU have been right at the lead. It's going to happen now in Madrid in a few weeks, and the following year it's here. It's going to be here.
Yeah.
The UK doesn't negotiate in those on its own. It negotiates as part of the EU.
Because you get more clout.
Exactly.
More leverage.
And that's how we got Paris, because of the EU working together. So we're saying we're going to be a leader on climate, but we're going to stand outside the one body that leads on climate globally. How's that going to work? Particularly when it's going to be here in 2020,
and
when we're meant to have the new...
And even if you were in advance, what leverage would you have?
Very little. You know, we're going to have this conference a month after the US has a presidential election. What we're going to say, well, we've left the EU and we're going to negotiate on our own. We're going to host the conference, and the EU can do something else. It would be it's a nonsense. It's nonsense, really. You know, at this point, to show climate leadership by leaving the EU.
Because after all, the EU is us and our neighbouring countries in a very similar position in that respect, where we are interdependent, but where we can do a lot more if we get our act together jointly, and it's worth it.
So I've got a question, because I've run out of my beer, and so I can't
drink too quickly. Mike Galsworthy drinks too quickly.
I can't just sit and sip. I have to occupy myself with things. But no, out of all of these issues, cheers, out of all of these issues, which of them sort of resonate most on the doorstep? Because now that you're going around all the places and knocking on the doors, and you know, is it the green agenda?
Absolutely.
Is it jobs? Is it the responsibility of our country?
I'd say the top four issues are, I have to say, Brexit, climate, education, and health. The NHS. Those are the top four issues that people.
In terms of Brexit, like when people are frustrated by Brexit. Brexit impinging upon what frustrates them the most?
They just want a conclusion to it. So Remainers want a conclusion with a public vote and to have their say. That's really strong, and they're quite aligned to the democracy of that. And Leavers are like, well, it's just gone on too long. We just want it to finish. And but they say, well, what form of Brexit do you want? And they still can't answer that question.
That's interesting.
So it's really interesting, but they just want it to finish. You know, so there is some messaging here about the fact it's not going to message. Let's stop it, but you have your say, and then we'll finish it.
But Mike's point at how it impinges on other issues. Do you find on the doorstep people are beginning to say, well, if we Brexit, there's a risk to the number of nurses and doctors in our health service. If we Brexit, there's a risk to jobs. If we Brexit, there's a risk to security.
What I'm getting quite strongly is the people who did vote to leave are now thinking about the NHS and are thinking about potential having to open it up to US private healthcare if there's a US trade deal. And they don't quite say it like that, but that's exactly what they mean. And they are concerned about it. But they want to have both those things, but they know that they don't quite work together. And I think they need to have a public conversation about it. But this election, that's not really happening, or not yet. I mean,
well, the Tories are very, very alert to that, which is why you've got Matt Hancock, you know, looking earnestly down the camera, saying like, "We love the NHS. We will not sell the the NHS like that. And it's, okay.
It won't be up to him, though.
I mean, no one believes it because they came in 2010
to the Americans
under the promise. They came in 2010 under the promise there will be no top-down reorganisation of the NHS. Then in 2012 we had the Health and Social Care Act, the most disastrous top-down reorganisation of the NHS, but also we're already doing privatisation, and American companies already have their fingers in it, and they want to marketise it more.
Only at the edge. I think the biggest lesson here actually is the proposed deal with US so-called TTIP, which didn't work out. Thankfully, the EU decided against it. Yes. They want to have this mechanism where US companies could challenge things that are in the public sector. And UK Health is one of the big ones.
They could sue the British government in court for taking public interest measures that impinge on their profits.
Could you imagine them signing a trade deal with the UK that did not include that? I can't.
Not this lot, certainly not.
And this is an important thing, because we haven't done trade deals in a long time. You know, if this just gets signed off by Parliament, and it's a right-wing Parliament, and no one sees the detail of the negotiations before it's thrown upon Parliament, that's where we are. But while we were in the EU, then actually you saw democracy in action Europe-wide, because, let's face it, the Council and the Commission were largely for this, but the Parliament weren't, and the Parliament were listening to the publics that they represent, and there were big demonstrations about this, particularly in Germany, and we forced more and more transparency, and then said, hold up, you know, we don't care if this is even Obama pushing this through. We don't like the look of chlorinated chicken. We don't like how this enters our health service. We don't like the general farming and food and chemical standards being pushed upon us. And so it was actually via public pressure and through having many countries working together that slowed it down enough and gave enough different angles on it.
EU trade deals have to be approved by the elected European Parliament, whereas what is envisaged in Britain under the legislation is that the government alone will sign off on trade deals with no say for the House of Commons.
And I think if it's a Conservative majority government, they do it behind closed doors and we couldn't force them to publish anything. So we'd only know at the end how bad it would be. And I don't think anybody wants that.
Whereas the European system is at least much more transparent, and you have this parliamentary sign-off, which is a guarantee to avoid, in the way you just described, avoid disasters happening.
So we handled it well in Europe. That's why I want to be in Europe, so that we've got the buffering of like-minded countries with whom we have built these standards.
Absolutely. Right, so obviously we're looking to the future now, the future of the European Union. There's been a lot of criticism of the European Union really since the Barroso presidency. We've got this new presidency, and when I came over to see you, Richard, in Brussels, I met Nicola Schmidt, who's been nominated with the Commission for Employment and Social Rights, and he had, for me, a really exciting programme. He talked about ending zero-hours contracts, equal work for equal pay, so no undercutting, so workers from one part of Europe can come to another part of Europe and undercut wages, which is actually, if we're honest about it, particularly in working class communities, one of the drivers of Brexit. So isn't the European Union listening to the concerns of working people in countries like the UK now?
Yeah, that's the proof that it is listening, because his ambition is to make sure you can't have undercutting. And that's exactly why we try and have common rules for the common market, is so that you don't have a race to the bottom in standards at the workplace, or in consumer protection rights, or in environmental standards. By acting jointly with common rules for our common market, you stop that race to the bottom.
I mean, when he was talking to me, it sounded to me like he was reading out the Labour Party manifestos, talking about banning unpaid internships, raising minimum wage, zero-hours contracts. It will sound like the Labour Party manifesto. Is that what's happening in the European Union? They're listening to the Labour Party and the Labour Party's agenda?
He is a socialist. The Luxembourg government, given its composition, has nominated as a socialist commissioner. When Labour comes to power, if that's still an option, if it's not already been sorted, we will nominate the socialist commissioner.
So it'd be better to nominate after the 12th of December then, wouldn't it, at this rate, if we can wait that long?
Yes.
That'd be very positive, I mean, that is a question, isn't it? Who is going to be the British Commissioner to the EU? Mike, come on, you must have some ideas about who you'd like to see.
We were having a chat about
Mike Galsworthy Commissioner, I don't know, who would be a good commissioner?
Well, I mean, as Rich was saying before, someone who can actually withstand a 3-hour grilling by our elected representatives from all across Europe to see if they're fit for doing the job.
Yeah.
And again, to steal your other line, like Chris Grayling would not pass that test.
No.
But here, you know,
Who would?
in the UK,
Who would?